society has told us that we have to do it all, be Pinterest perfect, look amazing, look like we stepped off the cover of Cosmo, have our house organized in a Pinterest perfect way, be the best, get everything done, and then still have time to run our businesses. And we feel like all of that pressure should be squarely on our shoulders. So I used to think Rachel has to do it all. Rachel has to do all the things, but I don't do all the things anymore. And so I teach other business owners how to not do all the things, but still get all the things done.
Welcome to the Online Genius Podcast, where host and renegade thinking beer brewing lawyer turned online entrepreneur Bobby Klink proves that building and protecting your online genius doesn't have to be rocket science. Bobby and his expert guests break down online marketing and the legal stuff so you can stop sweating the small stuff and get back to building your amazing business. Now, here's your host, Bobby Klink.
Hey there, welcome to episode 82 of the Online Genius Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Klink, and I'm really excited for today's show because I'm talking with one of my friends about how to use systems to make your business run like clockwork. In other words, how to kind of build systems into your business so that you're not constantly chasing your tail. I got to admit, this is something I'm still working on. I'm still trying to perfect this. Because, I've been doing this pretty much by myself. I have a VA in place who helps me with some of the things, but I still have been doing a lot in my business and probably too much in my business myself without systems. And so I'm in the process of kind of getting that stuff in place. And so it was a real pleasure to talk to someone about how you can use systems to really make your business better. And the guest today is Rachel McMichael. And Rachel is one of my fellow masterminders within the James Wedmore Inner Circle. And she is just a fantastic person to know. She's a business strategist and coach who helps female entrepreneurs leverage the power of Facebook advertising and break through their business ruts to launch and scale their online businesses. Through her signature programs, the Academy course and the Business Breakthrough Group Coaching Program and her podcast, Business with Impact, Rachel works with driven entrepreneurs to bring them the strategies they need to build a business that allows them to live the life they love while still creating a massive impact. Her raving fans and clients have called her a fantastic mentor and have said working with Rachel has honestly been the best business decision I have made. And again, she's also, talks about in the interview things about how she's able to work only, a few hours a day and then spend time with her family. And that's part of what is important to her here. She has 2 kids and she wants to make sure that she has a life where she can actually do that. And so she is a great guest to talk about systematizing and kind of building these things into your business so that you can actually get more done with less work. Now, again, if you listen to this show, that there are some things I honestly believe you should not systematize. There are probably things that, I shouldn't say probably, there are things that Rachel has systematized that I wouldn't do personally. But I'm also a believer in different strokes for different folks. And so I think it's useful to hear the things that she teaches, the things she suggests, so that you can get an idea of the different ways that you can go about building your online business and hopefully ways that you can save yourself some time without costing yourself a bunch of impact. Now, before we get to the interview, though, this episode, as always, is brought to you by the Online Genius podcast community on Facebook. I love coming to you and in this podcast and giving you, my thoughts. Sometimes I'm just pontificating and people seem to like that. Other times I bring great guests on who have some great information. But the reality is I don't want a one-way conversation. I want to engage with you. I want to go back and forth with you. I want to be able to actually have a conversation with you rather than just talking at you. And in a podcast, that's not really possible. But in a Facebook group, it is. And so that's the point of the Online Genius podcast community Facebook group. It's a place where we can talk about the episodes. We can talk about marketing issues. We can talk about, business building issues. We can talk about the legal stuff if that's what you want. But it's a group of entrepreneurs who are trying to build online businesses and doing it the right way. People who are looking to do it over the long term, not looking for quick fixes, not looking for, get rich quick schemes. So it's a group of really great entrepreneurs. And the great thing is, although I get to engage with you, there is a lot of community wisdom there. And you'll find that if you find a good Facebook group, I think you'll find that the community wisdom is often some of the best part. So I'd love for you to join me in the Online Genius podcast community on Facebook. And you can do that by going to youronlinegenius.com/community. Again, youronlinegenius.com/community. It'll take you right to the page to join the group. Just make sure you answer the questions because that's the only requirement I have. So with that, now let's get to this fantastic interview with Rachel McMichael. Welcome to the show, Rachel. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, we were talking before this. I always like to ask my guests something interesting about them. Normally, it's not business related, but you told me something that's business related that we got to talk about.
All right, let's do it.
You close your laptop at noon every day and are done with work. That's what you told me. Is that right?
I do.
And you were running a very successful multi-six-figure business, right?
Correct.
Okay, so you got to tell me, and that's what we're going to talk about a lot in this interview. How are you able to do that? And how do you not get pulled back in after noon?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it wasn't always this way, first of all. In fact, just a few years ago, I was actually working until 2:00 in the morning every day and barely seeing my family. And there came a point where kind of that breaking point that everyone has in their business, hopefully everybody has in their business. Hopefully most people don't even have to have that breaking point. But if you're working till 2 a.m., you should have that breaking point and you should not doing this anymore. And I had that breaking point and I said, this has to stop. And so what I did was I got very intentional with the activities that only required my attention in the business. And I started to systemize and process out everything else in the business. And then I started to delegate everything that was systemized and processed out that did not require me to actually show up and be a part of it. And so because of that, now I am freed up to do the things that really only Rachel can do. And because of that, now I'm able to work those 4 hours a day, 8 to noon. It's a little different now that my kids are in school. So sometimes that might be 9 to 1, but it's 4 hours a day. And at the end, I close the laptop. I don't check the phone and I hang out with my kids.
I'm just going to say hashtag goals. I will never get to the 4 hours a day. I just want to get to the hashtag goals of being able to let go. That's something I struggle with. Did you struggle with that when you were first starting out doing this?
Yes, absolutely. And I think one of the big things for me was team and trusting my team and really being able to create that team culture and that team where I knew that things were going to happen. So I knew that I could stop at noon. And if something crazy happened, I was going to get an email or a text about it. And of course, I could respond to that quickly. But the reality is that most things are not that important. Like we would get emails from clients saying, urgent, urgent, urgent. Which headshot should I choose for this thing? And I'm like, that's not urgent. Like, that's just not.
That sounds very urgent, Rachel. I don't know what you're talking about.
I know, right? And so it was really helping my team too to discern like what is really an urgent crisis. And we define urgent as anything that's causing someone to lose revenue. Okay. And otherwise, it's not urgent. It might be annoying, but it's not urgent. And so then we also have processes in place for how do we handle these non-urgent things and how do we respond in a way that the client is okay, understands that we are for them and we are, we're working on it, but that does not require us to get up out of bed at 2:00 in the morning and respond.
Yeah. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of my listeners struggle with this because I do. You have to be willing to accept that it won't necessarily be done your way. Because that's what I struggle with. I'll be honest with you. I still struggle with that with things that I should have given up long ago. So that is something that I think a lot of people struggle with. And it sounds like you've managed to get over that mindset issue. But why don't you tell, I mean, I did in the intro, I've introduced you, but why don't you tell my listeners a little bit about your business so they understand what you do and kind of your business and your life, because I think that's important for kind of what you do and the value you can offer.
Yeah. So how far back do you want me to go, Bobby?
Well, why don't we start with now and then you can give us a little bit of backshot about what's changed in the last couple of years.
Yeah. So what I do right now today is I help busy entrepreneurs automate their businesses and automate their lives so that they have the time that they want to spend with their families. What I found is that most entrepreneurs, they're stuck in that hustle pattern and they're of the mindset, and I get it because I was there, that the only way to grow my business is to work harder, and I don't have any more hours to work, so I'm just going to stay stuck. And that is so false. But it wasn't until somebody else pointed that out to me that I finally got clear on, oh my goodness, that you're right. That is false. I can actually start to work smarter, be more systemized, put more processes in place. And so I did that in my own business. I got it like Bobby, and like we were talking about, like I'm able now to close the laptop every day, spend that quality time with my family. And so I want to teach other people how to do that. And specifically, I have a huge heart for busy moms and busy wives, because I think society has told us that we have to do it all, be Pinterest perfect, look amazing, look like we stepped off the cover of Cosmo, have our house organized in a Pinterest perfect way, be the best, get everything done, and then still have time to run our businesses. And we feel like all of that pressure should be squarely on our shoulders. So I used to think Rachel has to do it all. Rachel has to do all the things, but I don't do all the things anymore. And so I teach other business owners how to not do all the things, but still get all the things done.
Yeah, I have to say, and I've told many of my female entrepreneur friends this, that it is unfair. There is no question about it. And it's unfair in so many different ways. I mean, the expectations, but I mean, separately from that, I'm pretty sure other than people commenting that sometimes it looks like I have black eyes, nobody comments on my lives about what I look like. And I know that's something that you women entrepreneurs have to deal with all the time. And it drives me nuts. And I want to smack people who say it. I mean, is part of it getting over that? Or is it just, finding ways to deal with that?
I think it's both. So there's a huge mindset shift that absolutely has to happen. You have to be okay with not doing it all yourself. And for someone like me who is super type A and knows that I am the best person to do it all and only I can do it this way, that was really hard. Another thing that was really hard for me as I was really moving into this series of automation was training someone else to help me, because I wanted them to be perfect the first time. And I had to really learn how to write down and systemize and process everything that I do, and then hand it over and teach someone and have them come alongside me. And what I used to tell myself, and I think we're all guilty of this, was, well, I can just do it faster, so I'm just going to do it right now. Or, oh, she didn't do it right, I'm just going to fix it really quick. But that's not how to automate and scale. That is how to keep yourself stuck doing the same thing over and over again, and how to get really frustrated with the people that really want to help you. Like the people you hire, they really want to help you. They don't want to do it wrong. Nobody goes to work every day and thinks, I really want to screw up all day today. Like They want to help you and serve you. And so I had to get over my ego. And then the second thing that I really had to do was write down everything I do. So what I do now is anytime I do something that's new, is I create a process document for it. And I write it down exactly what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, what I'm doing, if I'm looking at reports or comparing things, anything I do, I'm creating a process document for it. And then the very next time, I'm trying to be the one who doesn't do it anymore. So the very next time, I'm handing it to my assistant and saying, who do we have on the team who could do this? Who would be really great at this? All right, how can we train them to do this? And maybe I create a video screen grab of how to do it. And then I let them do it and I check it. And then I use I do it, watch me do it, you do it while I watch you do it and I'll check your work. And now you just go do it. Yeah. And I'll review it every once in a while. And so I really train my team up to do everything so that I'm showing up for things like this, showing up for my podcast interviews, but I'm not doing anything else when it relates to the podcast. Everything else is happening in the background without me.
Okay, well, so I do want to follow up on that, but first talk for a second about how you built your business, because you didn't build your business as teaching people how to automate. So what were you doing like 6 months ago?
Right. Okay. So 6 months ago, and maybe we should actually, let me back up to like 2.5 years ago, where I was running a web design and Facebook ads agency. And I also had online courses. And that's when I was really stuck in the hustle. Like I was working until 2:00 in the morning. I was trying to do it all myself. I had all these team members, but I wasn't allowing them to utilize their strengths. So I was still doing it all. I was still reviewing it all. I was still the one trying to get everything done. I had a team, but I wasn't leveraging my team. I wasn't utilizing my team, and I was still making it the Rachel McMichael show. And I was burnt out, and I was exhausted, and I was tired. And so about 2 years ago, somebody, James Wedmore, who we're in his mastermind together, said, This has got to stop. This is not the way to live your life. You are exhausted. Like I can tell you're exhausted. Like you look miserable. And he said, you've got to shut down the pieces of your business that are no longer serving you. And so that was terrifying. I was like, I'll go broke. I can't do that. Like literally I'll go broke. And another person in our mastermind said, I won't let that happen, Rachel. If you get in a position where you feel like you're going to go broke, I will give you a client, a very high level client, and I will make sure that does not happen. And I wasn't strong enough mentally to have been able to do that on my own, to be honest. But when I had that reassurance from someone else where they said, I'm not going to let you fail, I did it. And that was the best decision I could have ever made. So I started scaling back on the amount of services I myself was performing and really got crystal clear on who I wanted to serve and how I wanted to serve them. And part of that was through one of my signature courses, which is the Academy, my Facebook ads program. And so I went all in on the Academy and really made that my main focus, really helping and serving people with their Facebook ads. And so that's what I spent time really perfecting and getting that course in place and getting an automated funnel in place and getting a launch strategy in place that I could just duplicate each time we launched so that launching felt easy and felt fun. And that's the systems that I started to perfect. And my team and I worked together to continue to perfect those systems so that in my business, we knew what we were doing every day. We knew the goals we were working towards every day. We knew what needed to happen every moment of the day. There's deadlines and there's calendars and there's systems and processes and batching that happens every single month with every single member of the team. And so it started to really work like clockwork. And it took it took months to get all those systems in place. But also about a year ago, I found out I was pregnant again. Surprise. And I knew that if I wanted to be able to spend time with this little baby boy that I now have, if I wanted to really be able to be present in a way that I wasn't fully present for my daughter when she was this age, that I had to get it together, had to get everything together and get it even more organized and even more structured. And so about 3 months into my pregnancy was when we started closing the laptop at noon every day. And I've never looked back.
Yeah. So that's amazing. And I want to put a pin in a couple of things in that answer that listeners, I want you to hear these things and take some messages from it. First of all, I want to kind of really focus in on the fact that Rachel was able to make this change because she had support from, you could call them colleagues, you could call them friends, you could call them whatever you want. I mean, it was mastermind members, but the idea is having people who are going to be your support network, who are your business friends, call them that, whatever they are, is hugely important. I know it. I've known it for a while now. And, so that's one piece I wanted you to hear, listeners. Make sure you understand that. Cultivate those relationships. Now, maybe it's not exactly what Rachel said, where they said, well, I'll give you a client if it fails, but having those friends is important. So
absolutely,
that's point number one. And point number two, and it fits in, literally, I recorded something. When I'm recording this with you, Rachel, I recorded a solo episode earlier this week about my non-launch launch, which, I've talked about in our mastermind group. For a long time, I felt like I had to make stuff hard. And I don't know why we do that. Why do we think we have to make launching hard You don't. You have to find ways to make it easy. And that was a lesson that Rachel learned. And so that was hugely important. Now, I do want to talk, though, for a second about the work-life balance. And I don't even want to use that phrase because it has, I think, the wrong connotation. But the reality is we all have to, find ways to get things done at home and in our business. And how do you navigate that piece?
That was really challenging for me as well, because I am one of those people that takes everything on my shoulders and thinks that I have to do it all. And so in my mind, when I started my business, because I started staying home and I was staying home, I was with children, I felt like, okay, I have to create this thriving business, but I also need to be solely responsible for all the dishes, all the laundry, all the things that have to happen around the house, all the cleaning. And what was happening is that I was spending all my time on all of those tasks and not the time that I needed to invest in my business to really get my business moving forward. So after a long day of doing everything around the house and trying to spend time and be present with kids, then I would finally get to work after my husband went to bed. And so I'd be working from like 9 to 3 or 9 to 2 or crazy ridiculous hours in addition to nap times. And that just wasn't sustainable. But again, I felt all this pressure, like I've got to be the one who bakes the cake. I've got to be the one who cooks all the meals. And this is what I've learned. And this was really hard for me. And so if you're listening to this and you're like, this is hard for me to accept too, listen, I get it. But do those things need to get done? Yes. Does laundry need to get done? Of course. We need clean clothes to wear. Do dishes need to get done? Of course. We need clean utensils to eat with. Does food have to get prepared? Yes, it's important to feed our families every single night. They should eat. That's important.
Yes. Rachel is not saying that our families don't eat.
Yes, do those things. But I don't have to do those things. I don't have to be the one physically doing them. I am only responsible for making sure they get done. And so as soon as I said, you know what? I'm not sure I have to be the one washing and drying the clothes. What if I got like a college student in here for like 10, 12 bucks an hour who needs that extra money, who wants to do something, who needs that flexibility and freedom in their own life, and I had them come and help? Or what if I had someone come and help, maybe after they finish the laundry, maybe they could also kind of help with the dishes. Maybe I could get someone to help lightly with the cleaning from time to time or help with some of the yard work from time to time. Now, I didn't start outsourcing everything all at once, but I started to gradually outsource things. And what I made sure was that while someone was here helping me out around the house, that I was doing revenue producing activities in my business.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about this for a second because we talked about it, Rachel, that before we hit record. I shared that forever I felt like I had to cut my own grass. And that came from my dad growing up. My dad always cut the grass. I think he enjoyed it. I don't know, but he always thought it was crazy. And he would tell me, you're insane to pay someone to do that. Well, actually, I'm not when I think about it now. And I haven't mowed my own grass in years because I basically said, my time is worth more, even if maybe it's revenue producing, or maybe that's the time I actually get to spend with my daughter. And so I made that shift a while back. And I think it's important that a lot of us don't think about maybe the first person we hire as, isn't someone actually in our business. You can hire someone to help you with your house, with your home, with all of that stuff. And that frees you up in your business. And a lot of people don't think about that. And it's probably cheaper on an hourly basis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you probably know how to delegate it a little bit better.
Yeah.
A lot of times when we're hiring in our business, if you've never created a landing page and you want to hire an expert that's going to do it for you, the expert's going to cost more than the admin. But if you don't know how to tell the admin to do it, now we have a problem.
Yep. And all that's right. Whereas, again, if I hire someone to cut my grass, I assume they know how to cut grass, right? Or, we have maids who come in every couple of weeks and, this is what they do day in and day out. And like you said, it's so funny. We don't have, at least I don't have trouble with delegating and feeling like they're not going to do a good job. Whereas in my business, somehow I do.
Absolutely. And the other thing too, from a mom perspective, was I felt a lot of like mommy guilt, like I'm so embarrassed. I don't want to tell anyone and then another thing came up for me in my mindset, which was, well, am I going to create entitled children? Because when we were little, we had to do all these things, but guess what? My children, they still do things around that. My 3-month-old doesn't, but my daughter, she still carries her dishes to the sink. She still picks up her dirty clothes. She still absolutely has responsibilities around the house. She's just not as responsible for some of the things that I was responsible for when I was a little kid.
Yeah. Well, and again, and maybe that's something that I'll deal with later, but I don't think about that with my daughter because again, with me growing up, it was things like I had to make my own bed. And that's something that my daughter will have to do, even though, it's not a big thing, but, things like that. So I've never worried about those things, but it's so interesting that we all deal with these guilt issues about it.
Yes.
So how'd you overcome the guilt?
I just started doing it. And once I started doing it, that freedom that I experienced outweighed any guilt that I had felt ahead of time. It was like, I think anytime we're up leveling in our business, our mind wants to keep us where we're at because it's so comfortable. But as soon as we take action, it's like all those little fears, they just go away. And so that's happened to me every time. Oh, I want to launch this thing. I'm scared. Oops, I just put it out there. All right, I'm not scared anymore. Let's go do it.
Or I'm scared, but too bad.
We're doing it. And so, there were things that came up ahead of time, but once you take action on any fear, the fear diminishes. And so I would just say, take action. That's how I get over the mindset issues.
Yeah. And I agree with you. The same way. I know I've always felt once I do something, once I'm sitting at a table, once I'm sitting somewhere, I always feel like I belong. So just getting there and taking the step. So listeners, I think that's it. Now, we talked about kind of, delegating in the home, et cetera, but you also stress kind of automating, systematizing, and all that in your business. How do you go about doing it in your business?
Absolutely. I believe everything should have a process. And I know there's people out there who are like, that's so rigid, Rachel. Like, I just can't function that way. I need to be creative. And I get it. But here's the thing. Having processes in place and knowing exactly what needs to be worked on is going to allow you to be more creative because you're no longer having to think about what comes next. And so what I started with and what I tell my clients to do is the very first thing is just start writing down what you're doing every day. And start writing down the processes as you do them. So create little process documents. So every time I go and create a landing page, I just do a quick screen flow while I'm creating it. And then I write down, okay, here's what I did. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. So the next time I have to create a landing page, someone else can go do all of the behind the scenes stuff and lead pages. And I just need to provide the title, the photo, the colors, or whatever it is that needs to change, needs to be uniquely different for this particular one. So I stress first just writing out systems and processes for everything that you do. Now that part's not automated, but it does allow you to be a lot more simplified in your business because you're not having to remember what to do next every time. And it makes things easier. So it makes things faster because we're not creating landing pages every day. We're creating them only when we have new offers. And so if we're having to constantly be like, okay, what comes next? How do I do this again? We spend so much more time than is necessary. Or even better, we can delegate it to a freelancer or someone for very, very little in terms of financial, like I can do that. That's a $10, $15 an hour task. I could have a college student do it. I could have a freelancer do it. I could have someone on Fiverr do it. There's lots of options for how I can delegate some of those things, some of those smaller tasks. And then I start to delegate. And then once everything's systemized, once I've got proven systems in place, proven processes in place, then I start to automate.
Yeah. And I think what a lot of people, the resistance on a lot of this is that you're going to have to spend a little bit of extra time the first time you do it, right? To create the process. But at the end of the day, it's going to save you time every single time that process is run. So it's worth doing. But a lot of people struggle with that, I think, because they have trouble with, I don't have time right now.
Yes. So I actually struggled with this recently, which is hilarious because it's something that's so ingrained in our business and has been so ingrained for so long now that it was my podcast. So I launched a podcast back in October, and I knew everything that needed to get done. So I hired these editors and I was like, okay, I'm going to get the file, send it to the editors, get it transcribed, create my show notes, put everything on the blog, upload it to Libsyn. And I want to make sure everything gets done exactly right. And I kept that on my plate for the first really 2 to 3 months. And then I was like, oh my goodness, Rach, you're going to have a baby in 2 weeks. You are not going to be able to do this. You've got to outsource this. And it took me an hour to create all the process documents, send them to my assistant. She helped figure out who was going to do what. And within a day, it had all been taken off my plate, and all I had to do was review it because I had created those screen like an hour, create those screen flows, say what needs to get done, and have somebody else do it. And I resisted that 1 hour and spent hours upon hours upon hours doing it over and over and over again for no reason other than I wanted to be in control.
So it's funny. I can't help but laugh because in so much of your business, pretty much in everywhere of your business, you are more systematized, more delegated, more all of that. But it's so funny because there are some places I never had trouble with. My podcast has always been, I record it, I send it off, they do everything else. And so I laugh because it is so funny how some of us, like a random thing, just we have trouble letting go of.
We just hold tight to this little thing.
And were you able to think through and figure out why it was that with the podcast you weren't wanting to let go when you had with everything else? Or is it just, it's a mystery?
It's ego.
Okay.
I think I have a really big ego. That's so embarrassing to admit publicly, but I know how to do it. I'm doing it right. What if they mess up? What if they don't post it? What if the blog doesn't get posted at the right time, or this doesn't get scheduled at the right time? And then I look dumb in front of everyone. Who is everyone anyway? And are they really going to think I'm dumb? I don't think so.
Yeah. When you get to that point where people are like emailing you saying, hey, where's your podcast? That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Let's all get there. Let's all get to the point that someone is that anxious and notices if your podcast isn't out right away. But, it is funny because, like I said, I think with me, it was just I outsourced that from day one. And because I outsourced it from the beginning, I never had a problem with it. There's two things I did, that and Pinterest. I don't even understand Pinterest. I understand it's a search engine with pictures. It's about all I get. So those things I'm good with, and the other stuff, not so much.
Content was also one that was hard for me to start to outsource, but it has been the biggest relief. And I was worried with content that I might lose my voice, but we've been really strategic and smart in the way that we do my content. So I actually have someone who comes up with my captions for Instagram every month. Yep. But I go in and I review them. So I make sure they're my voice, they're my words, they're exactly what I would say. Sometimes they'll say things like, oh, my favorite coffee includes 2 sugars. And I'm like, no, not Rachel. Rachel likes a coconut milk latte. Rachel needs to change this. And so I'll go in and I'll edit it. But I struggle with that. I'm not creative every single day. I'm sure most people aren't. And so I struggle with finding great pockets of time to be really creative at that. And so as soon as I outsourced to that and had somebody else start to do it for me, and then I just go in and edit it, I'm super creative in the editing process, and I can absolutely make it my own and make it really relevant. But I just couldn't put the original words down on paper. There was a block there. And so that was something that I struggled to outsource, but that has saved me hours and hours and hours of time every single month and made me more consistent.
Yeah. Well, and I'm doing that too. I've outsourced it, and I'm working on getting the process. But again, I think they give me like 2 weeks at a time. So all I have to do is go in there for 2, and it's really just a prompt. It's like, hey, this is ready. And so I go do it, and it takes me 20 minutes to edit everything. And it's the same thing you said with the tone at one point. Actually, I think it's my Instagram that came out today. It's a picture, that classic picture of the hustle mug. And it was originally about hustle. I said, no, I'm not about hustle. So I had to, edit it and change it so It wasn't. It was about we don't need to hustle. But it's interesting that those things we eventually figure out. But I've got you on here. I've got to talk about something that you were an expert in that everybody, I think everybody needs to understand more, and that's Facebook ads. Where do Facebook ads fit into automating, systematizing, delegating, scaling, all of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. They're the final step. So when it comes to automation, what I always tell people to do is we really start by identifying where's your business at? Where do you want it to be? Then we have to really break it down. We have to break down your processes and we have to really systemize and automate. But once we're systemized and automated, Facebook ads are such a great way to start to really bring in the traffic to the funnel. And Facebook ads can be the funnel. And so we use paid advertising all the time in our business to have that automated funnel working in the background, providing that consistent revenue stream and allowing us to get our message in front of the people who need to hear it the most. Not because I want to have a, $20 billion business, but because I have people that I want to serve. And I want to get in front of the right people at the right time as quickly as I possibly can because I have a solution to their problem. And so Facebook ads and paid advertising give me a way to do that. And it's a quick way. It's a faster way than some of the older, outdated marketing strategies.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's great that you talk about it as the final step because I see a lot of people posting in groups and they struggle with Facebook ads. And part of the reason they struggle with Facebook ads, a couple of things. Number one, the back end of their funnel is not right. So they don't yet have an offer that people want, but also they haven't found their voice and they haven't found their messaging. How often do you find that's a problem with people that that are trying to implement Facebook ads?
I think it's a huge problem. So there's really three things that you have to have in order to have a successful Facebook ad. You have to have a great strategy. And so if you don't understand the strategy behind your ads, that's going to be a problem. They're not going to work. You also have to have great messaging. And by messaging, I'm talking about your image, your copy. It all has to work. Your funnel's got to work in the background. The messaging's got to be there. And then you also have to be able to plug it into the ads manager. So you've got to be technical. And so there's three things that really come into play to run a really effective ads campaign. And what I find even with ads managers is that most ads managers are good at one or maybe two of those, but not all three. And if you talk to anybody, James Wedmore was telling us the other day, like he provides the strategy. He helps curate the copy and his ads manager goes and plugs it in to the ads manager and monitors it, watches it, tweaks it, tests it, does those types of things. But he's responsible for some of those other big key pieces. Where I see a lot of people make a mistake is they start too soon. They start with a bad strategy or they've got bad messaging. And so, yes, they learned how to put it in the ads manager, but that's just one piece of the puzzle.
Well, I have to say you left out something that I think is equally important to success with ads, and that is patience.
Yes.
I mean, I think, and I struggle with this too, and I forgotten who it was. I heard someone talking about this. At the end of the day, you need to be able to set a budget, which is, I mean, I don't know, maybe you're going to disagree with me, but I don't think it's like, I'm going to spend $100 or something like that. You have to be able to say a realistic budget and say, I'm just going to put that out there and I'm going to test it and I'm going to see what works. And then I'm going to tweak and optimize and go from there. And it takes some time. And often your first iteration doesn't win and you have to improve. I mean, what works today? I mean, what do you need to have budget wise to really start a real Facebook ads campaign?
Yeah, ads are a science experiment and all good science experiments take time to perfect. And so it's the same with ads. Now, I teach a strategy. Let me see if I can kind of break it down easily. It's a lot easier to do with pictures. But I basically teach a strategy where we test 10 different ad sets, 10 different audiences with the same ad, the same copy, same image across 10 different audiences. And what we do that for a couple days and we get data. That's all we're looking for. So it is a completely data-driven test. And what the data will tell us is it will tell us if the messaging and the copy are a problem or if the audiences are a problem. And so based on the data, then we tweak and we can refine and we can test additional images or test additional copy or test additional audiences. But what I find is if you'll test 10 audiences with the same image, same copy across 10 different audiences, typically 20% of those will have okay data. And if none of them have good data, if all of them are just like tanking, then what that tells me is that your image and typically we don't find people that have 10 horrible audiences, right? So if nothing works, then it's back to the drawing board on the image, on the creative, on the landing page, on the piece of that puzzle that's not working.
Right. And I think that's a valuable point. And again, you also need to know what your goal is to understand what your strategy is. And a lot of people I know, and I get it, when people are launching the first time, you don't know what your earnings per lead is going to be. You don't know those kinds of things, but you have to understand, like, I have a new strategy going right now, and I'm looking at my ads manager and I'm getting $5 leads. That's not ideal, but I know that my leads tend to be worth at least $10 to $11 for me in the relatively short term. So say it's not that big a deal. I'm not going to lose money on it, but you have to be willing to try those things and test it out, which I think a lot of people don't have the patience to do.
Absolutely. And I think too, is there's two ways to use ads. Some people use ads to test their funnel.
Yep.
And some people run ads to a proven funnel because they've already tested it organically. And so I prefer to run ads to a proven funnel that I've tested organically. I know it works. I've done an internal launch. And so I know that this sells, this product works, this messaging works, and now I can just amplify it with ads. But if you're trying to test a funnel with ads, that's where I say start really, really small and then scale. Get 100 people through your funnel, see what's wrong with your funnel, use the data to make the determinations on what's working and not working within the funnel. And then, yes, you're probably going to have to run another 100 people through and then another 100 people through until you fix the funnel.
Yeah. Well, and my thing, what I've learned in my business, and every business is different, but I've largely learned that my funnels are going to be a long-term process. And so I use Facebook ads not as kind of an evergreen sales, but as an evergreen lead generation. I'm bringing people into my world with them, and then I nurture them months. And I've talked about this recently. Some people who literally just bought during my mini launch have been on my list for over a year. And I know that happens, and I view it with that long-term goal. But yeah, I know a lot of people who you'd be horrified by it, Rachel. I mean, they have no list. And so they are going to launch without any kind of list with Facebook ads. And that's a rough thing to do. It's a rough way to try to test your funnel.
It's very difficult.
I don't want to get too much into ads, but let's talk. I think a lot of the problem people have is there's a lot of different strategies taught. How are they supposed to wade through the different strategies that people are teaching out there?
Oh man, this is so tough. So here's what I would say. You could talk to 10 different ads managers and get 10 different answers on anything in the ads world.
Yep.
My best recommendation is to make sure that you learn how to understand and interpret the data. Because when it comes to ads, our intuition is awesome. In most parts of our business, we should follow our intuition. We should trust our intuition. But when it comes to ads, the only thing we need to understand in order to troubleshoot is the data and what the data is telling us. Yep. So I would find someone who teaches a strategy, this is what we teach, that really dives into what is the data telling us. And then the second thing that I would say is I would be very cautious about taking courses that have not been updated. The ads manager changes so frequently that you're going to want to make sure to plug into a program that is keeping current with current trends in the ads manager. And what we are finding right now that works really, really well is what Bobby said, making sure that you are warming up your audience. Now, you can warm up your audience with paid ads. You can do, run ads to videos or blogs or, different other pieces of your website. You can run ads to page posts for engagement and build up engagement, building up these warm audiences that we then retarget to get their name and email address and get them into our funnels. That is proving to be the best strategy. And I believe long term, that's going to be the most viable strategy as we continue to get into more saturated markets.
Yeah. And I mean, it's one of those things that's so strange. And Rachel, I think we talked about it when I was struggling to get good webinar leads when I did a launch in January. I mean, there are so many small differences, like even about, I think you teach start with a bunch of different audiences, individual audiences, small numbers. Other people teach, let's group them all together and use a big, let Facebook's algorithm do its thing. And so I think that's where some people struggle. But I think the advice needs the nugget I want to get out of that is find someone who's teaching you to go to the data, because that is a hugely important thing. If you're not looking at the data with Facebook ads, you're not doing yourself any services.
Totally. And there's really only, like you said, two numbers that we care about. We care about our earnings per lead and our cost per lead.
Yep.
That's it. If our cost per lead is great, we don't have to troubleshoot anything else. It's only when our cost per lead isn't working. And that's where you want to make sure to understand the numbers so you can troubleshoot why isn't it working. And the numbers will always tell us what's working and what's not working.
Yeah. And again, and that's an important point, but also, and I'm sure you could ask this question all the time and it probably drives you nuts. People always want to know, what should my cost per lead be? And my answer, if people ask me that, is, well, it's going to depend on so many different factors, but ultimately you need your cost per lead to be lower than your earnings per lead.
100%. Yes.
And if you get there, then it's a matter of tweaking, but it's an interesting thing that people fight with all the time. I'll be honest with you. I'm always stunned that people aren't using Facebook ads just for pure lead generation as much anymore. I guess some people do, but I see a lot of launch ads, a lot of evergreen funnel ads. I don't see a lot of lead gen ads anymore, which is kind of strange, but I guess people want to be evergreen. And so that's what's happening.
Yep. And we do still use them for lead gen in our business.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in using them for lead gen in addition to using them for things like evergreen and live launching.
Yeah. Well, and I've figured out in my business, people don't, it makes sense, right? People aren't going to find a legal guy and buy immediately. And so I think I'm at the point that I'm no longer going to use launch ads other than retargeting of my warm audience, just because I don't think it's worth trying to bring people up in and warm them up. So, everybody has to have their own strategy, but that's valuable. But we got into this. Let me get back to the broader point, though, about really kind of getting a business and a life that's streamlined and lets you live the life you want at the end of the day, which I think is really what you want to help people with.
Absolutely.
So if you could give listeners one call to action, one thing to do that is kind of bite-sized as the first step, what would it be?
The very first thing that I teach my clients, and I'm going to give two, even though you only told me to give one, I'm going to give two. The first one is you've really got to identify where you're at and where you want to go. Because if you don't know those things, it's really hard to get you to where you want to be. And so you got to know where you want to go. Do you want to only work 4 hours a day, or do you like working 8 hours a day? Do you want to close your laptop at noon, or do you where do you want to go? And then the very next thing to do is you've got to start to identify your processes. You've got to simplify your business. You've got to break it down and simplify it into little small tasks that you're doing every day. And so if you do those two things, then you're going to be ready to automate, to delegate, to outsource, and then to scale.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I want to put a pin in that first piece. Part of what this means, listeners, is figuring out, do you want to have a big team, or would you rather have a smaller business, has less revenue? And that's just an individual choice, right? Some people want to get to 7 figures. Some people don't. Some people would rather say, hey, if I get to 6 figures, that's all I need. So figure that piece out, and that will guide you in a lot of things you do. So I'm glad that you started with that and then gave the piece of advice, kind of figuring out what you're actually doing every day. So that's been great. Rachel, thank you for coming on. Where can my listeners find you?
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, the best place to find me is on my website, rachelmcmichael.com, or on Instagram, I'm at Rachel R. McMichael. And that's where I hang out all the time. I hang out on Instagram. That's where I DM, I interact, I spend time talking to people. And then on my website is where you can find all my free downloads, masterclasses, and really connect with me.
So listeners, do that. We'll have links to all of that in the show notes. But again, Rachel, thank you for coming on. I think what you've shifted your business to is fantastic. It's a message that we need to get out more. So I'm a big supporter of it. And I hope some listeners are going to follow you, are going to kind of get into your world and are going to start learning from you. So thank you very much for coming on and delivering all this value.
Thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Listeners, that's it for this week's episode of the Online Genius Podcast. I'll be back next week with another episode. Talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the Online Genius Podcast. Make sure to tune in next week for more great tips, tricks, and strategies to help you build and protect your online genius.